Hello, people, bots, and trolls of the internet, and welcome to Thesis Statement, the show where a self-proclaimed expert on literature who published a book at one time spills his unprompted opinions. In this episode, said pretentious writer is going to embrace his white maleness and tell you his thoughts on women, even though you never asked. Hi, Josh Price, how you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Now, I should probably clarify and bolster my position here before we truly begin. As a suburbanite white American male in his late 20s, I am both the target audience and the kind of writer who needs to be privy to the conversation we're going to have today. White male writers and white male audiences alike have a deep disparity between how they imagine women and how women actually behave. In typical fashion, rather than actually studying and understanding women as people, many members of my corner of the population have decided for ourselves how the perfect woman should act. Out of that mindset, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl was born. Rather than tackling the greater issue and actually attempting to do some good in this world, I would rather discuss the Manic Pixie Dream Girl and continue to indulge my own ego. The term itself was coined by film critic Nathan Rabin, and was specifically in reference to Kirsten Dunst's character in Elizabethtown. Contrary to popular belief, the classification was meant to draw attention to this misogynistic trope, rather than attempting to define and entrench it. In the years since its coinage, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl character has seen a wide variety of iterations. While each version is a little bit different, the various styles of Manic Pixie Dream Girl can be broken down into two camps. The first being the perfect quirky girl who fills the every need of the protagonist and props him up as a man, and the second being the girl who the protagonist is drawn to and attracted to, but the primary conflict of the relationship and possibly the entire work is that they do not work as a couple. In both depictions, much like the magical black man trope, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl has little to no character development. She is as good as she will ever get, and in many cases is downright perfect. She exists often only to teach the white male protagonist some giant lesson and help further his development. Again, reminiscent of the magical black man trope. In Manic Pixie Dream Girls, more than in almost any other character depiction, the opinions, desires, and, dare I say it, kinks of the writer are displayed almost completely unveiled. They tend to be emo, or hipster, or occasionally goth. They're always counterculture and different, unique, and admirably distinct. They are independent, and in the more self-aware depictions, the protagonist struggles with the fact that while he is attracted to this individuality, he is culturally conditioned to tame the shrew, as it were. Wait. Hold on a second. Did Billy fucking Shakespeare invent this character trope? Blowing my own mind over here. Gosh, this makes so much sense. Literarily speaking, much of our modern style has roots or seeds in Shakespeare's work, and many of those things he didn't invent, he mastered or perfected. So the question can be posed as to whether the taming of the shrew was a parody of the accepted role of a woman, or if it was merely a product of its time. In truth, I guess there's strong evidence for both, so it falls to the reader or viewer to decide. I mean, personally, I find there's lots of evidence that Willy Boy was a pretty woke dude in his other works, so I'd like to think he was poking fun at the social norms associated with the quote-unquote ideal woman. Now, truth be told, this trope is not necessarily or inherently a bad thing. As with everything in storytelling, there are just as many good ways to use this tool as there are bad ones. When the term is used, it's often derogatorily, defining the shallow, inhuman, and dismissive ways that women are written and portrayed. However, as a tool for pointing out some deeply ingrained flaws in society and masculinity, as well as being an example of strong womanhood, it can be incredibly useful. For those of you who listen to the Price is Right podcast, you may remember I lauded praise on the character of Ramona Flowers from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World for being a good example of this character in the right light. Ramona has practically no development throughout the entire film. At the very least, we're not given her story as a point of interest. As far as her journey goes, it only matters as far as it relates to Scott. However, that was not by mistake. The whole point of Scott Pilgrim's character is to highlight how terrible he is and force him to take agency of his own life. Normally, it is the job of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl to be the cause of this change, and while Ramona does help facilitate this growth in Scott at the end, it's made abundantly clear that it is not the power of love that will save Scott, but rather the power of self-respect.
Scott earned the power of self-respect.
This is not something Ramona, or anyone else for that matter, can give him. That has to come from genuine development on his part. Ramona, if one wishes to look into her character, does have a history. She has made mistakes and she owns them. And Granted, the comic book digs into this more than the film, but even the film, she acknowledges that she moved to Ontario to start over and work on herself. The irony here is that it appears the process of seeing her flaws and moving to a place where she could engage in some much needed self-care and introspection was enough growth to make her appear independent, wise, and strong. These traits, along with her unique appearance, are the very things Scott thinks he is in love with. But this video isn't about Scott Pilgrim, so I'll close out that chapter by saying Edgar Wright sometimes struggles with writing female characters, but in this case, I'd argue he got it as close to perfect as he could across the board. We're talking about development with knives, good backstory, and good depiction of this trope with Ramona, and a pretty decent villain out of Envy. Annie Hall is possibly the most masturbatory version of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Written and directed by Woody Allen and also starring Woody Allen, it is a clear window into what Sir Woody Allen, the poster child of Hollywood screenwriting, thought was important in a woman. Sex. It's no secret that this guy was a creep, and this movie made it abundantly clear. Also becoming abundantly clear is my need to rant and rave against some guy in every single episode of this show. So here I am, your white knight. Carrying on. Annie is the only woman in Alvy, or Woody Allen's life, who he can satisfy sexually, and in turn, who can satisfy him. They have a lot of fun together, but all their fun moments lead to and culminate in sex.
Whole life is sex.
His whole life revolves around it. His successes call for it, his insecurities are because of it, his jealousies are about it, and his attempts at recovery are, if you can even call them that, based on it. Annie Hall, in the eyes of the protagonist, is nothing but a body. Obviously, this is massively problematic. However, there's still room to learn here, because Woody Allen accidentally puts forth the lesson at the end that should be learned from all of this, despite actively trying not to learn anything. That lesson being, if this is how you see women, no relationship you ever have will work. Eventually, this view of the world will shine through and overtake any good things in every relationship, and everything will go sour. And when that's the case, it's best to go your separate ways and do your own thing. If you're a Woody Allen type, stay single and stop damaging people. If you're an Annie Hall type, stay away from Woody Allen.
I know, a relationship, I think, is like a shark. You know, it has to constantly move forward or it dies. And I think what we got on our hands is a dead shark.
Long before the clarification of the archetype, Audrey Hepburn seemed to be cast constantly in the quote-unquote Annie Hall type Manic Pixie Dream Girl roles. Breakfast at Tiffany's is possibly her best known, but she was the quintessential, unattainable Hollywood dream that every man wished to capture back in the day. Her roles had her playing more whimsical parts, inspiring the men around her to be better, but rarely would her characters be given room to grow, improve, and expand on their own. A more modern version of this typecast, and possibly a much better role model in how the archetype should be used, is the constant casting of Zooey Deschanel.
I don't know how to tell you this, man. There's a Chinese family in our bathroom.
From 500 Days of Summer, to Yes Man, to New Girl, and even to her role in Elf, she is the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. When you think about this trope, you think about Zooey Deschanel. Part of this may be she is actually a very bubbly and wondrous person, so it's easy for her to fit into these roles. However, there's an admirable number of writers who have written parts for her that display the archetype in all the best ways. While the character usually does help the protagonist or male characters around her to grow and develop, she's rarely robbed of any personal agency. In 500 Days of Summer, for example, she refuses to compromise anything about herself for Joseph Gordon-Levitt. In Yes Man, Jim Carrey realizes that he doesn't have to change anything about himself, and she doesn't need to change. They just need to decide to go through life together because they care about each other the way they are. His arc in that movie is also about learning to accept change, adapt to life, and enjoy the moment, all of which are things that Zooey Deschanel's character already understands, but does not necessarily teach him. In New Girl, we get a deep dive into the daily life of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, seeing her insecurities, her weaknesses, her mistakes, the lessons she learns, and taking the trope and just making it into a much more tangible and real person. The character in New Girl has friendships and relationships and personal struggles and a career, and it's much more personal. It brings that character down to earth and gives it a lot more depth. Obviously, this list could go on and on. The character has been written both poorly and very well in various circumstances. While the poor execution does immediately fall into sexist and misogynistic territory, it doesn't necessarily negate the value of the times it's been done right. When the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is written correctly, when she's given humanity, agency, and personality, she becomes a powerful ally, both to the characters in the story and to the writer. When displayed as a person, she has the capacity to be more important to the protagonist, being someone who doesn't just teach lessons or support you when you're down, but's a real person in your life. She becomes someone you talk about life with, someone who comes to you with their problems and asks for a listening ear or advice, just as often as you go to them for the same thing. The Manic Pixie Dream Girl becomes someone who can and will be honest with you and wants the best for you. She becomes a friend. As far as the writer is concerned, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl can be your strongest character. She can be the person you lean on for exposition and dialogue, because given her quirky and blunt personality, it makes sense narratively when she says things outright and openly. It makes sense for her to address the elephant in the room, or to bring attention back to some prescient issue without making it obvious or awkward. That's who she is. That's how she speaks. And because you set her up to be that beautiful blunt flower for the entire story, now, in your time of need, she can openly point to the final boss and say, "Your journey leads you that way."
Mom, Verb and I are going on a quest.
The Manic Pixie Dream Girl must be treated with respect, both from the writer and the audience. This archetype is different from every other character you will encounter, and thus demands proper treatment. She demands respect and space, and for her thoughts and opinions to be heard and understood. Her existence demands real treatment because, whether intentional or not, she is real. She may be inspired by a real person, or perhaps she's just a figment of the writer's imagination that follows him around every day and chases him in his dreams. The fact of the matter is, Manic Pixie Dream Girls are not an archetype. They're women. They're people. They're real. If you enjoyed this video, click the link in the description and support us over on Patreon. Once you've pledged your soul to our cause, you'll gain early access to all of our content. You'll even be able to get your earballs on some sweet patron-exclusive episodes of our podcast. Speaking of which, you should check out our podcast network as well, The Price is Right. We have a few different shows under that banner, available anywhere you listen to your podcasts, including Cocktail Cinema, where the Price is Right team mixes up a drink, talks about a movie each week, and the Fozcast, where everyone's favorite host interviews people with unique perspectives and insight on life. Don't forget to like and comment on this video, and subscribe to the channel. If you hit that bell icon, you'll get a notification every time Price is Right releases something new. That way, even if you find yourself fighting giant spiders, traveling through space, or having a bass battle with a psychic vegan, you'll never miss an episode. That said, be good. If you can't be good, don't get caught. And don't forget to say goodbye.